Okay, so it is 2 minutes past the hour, and I want to welcome everybody for coming to the Get to Know the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance webinar with Membership Director Bill Alder. He's going to take this time and just give you a little bit of information about what we do, the EEA's mission, and I'm going to turn it over to him.
All right. Thank you, Brianna. And thank you to everybody that joined us today. Hello, my name is Bill Alder, and welcome to our webinar, Getting to Know the EEA. We really appreciate you taking time out of what we know are very busy schedules so that you could join us this afternoon, learn a little bit about the EEA, what our vision is for the future, and our roadmap for 2019. A couple of housekeeping items. As people come in, they're going to be on mute, so please do enter any questions that you might have in the chat box. If it's a question that pertains to the slide that's being displayed, then I'll try and answer it right away. Otherwise, if it's coming up on the next slide, I might wait until that one comes up just to make it more contextually relevant to the conversation. We are also happy to share the slide deck with you, so please don't feel like you need to jot down all the content that you see. We'll be sending out an email with a link to the slides or a way to download those after the fact. And without further ado, so before diving into the slide deck and overview, I'd like to start by sharing our vision for the organization and Ethereum for the enterprise. One of the primary goals for EEA is the global harmonization for the enterprise Ethereum ecosystem, which that harmony is really best achieved through the global adoption of the technology, and really widespread global adoption is going to be achieved through interoperability. So what makes interoperability so important for us? It allows for multiple vendors of choice, which if you think about that in the terms of, say, you're going to out to buy a new television, don't you prefer being able to go to an electronics store and have your choice of maybe 5, 10 different brands at varying price points with varying features, or would you prefer that only one company made televisions, one brand? And then let's say it becomes no longer cost effective for them to put HDMI ports into their television, so they go back to coax, and you're now locked into this one option, and that better option goes away. Well, instead, with many vendors of choice, consumers drive the industry rather than the manufacturers, and then consumers then have more choices at a reduced cost. This eventually results in solutions of purpose, solutions that have varied price points and that can meet specific needs. These will ultimately be the best solutions. So where does this process begin? First, you need a specification. And the Cambridge Dictionary defines a specification as a detailed description of how something should be done, made, etc. So effectively, what a specification is and does is lay the groundwork to deliver a standard. Coming full circle, a global standard is the best way to deliver interoperability, which leads to the harmonization of the ecosystem. And this all sounds well and good, right? Well, let me give you an example that kind of puts it into context. If you buy a Samsung phone in any city, let's say Hong Kong, and then you have a trip to Europe, you go to Spain, and that's where you buy your SIM card. So effectively, you have a device that was manufactured most likely in Vietnam, a phone that was purchased in Hong Kong, and a SIM card purchased in Spain. Do you doubt that that phone will work? Well, no, you know that it will because there are specs and standards that ensure that it will. And long lines of testing to make sure that those devices and those pieces of hardware meet those specs and standards. And really, as this example illustrates, interoperability creates trust. And trust is perhaps the most important aspect to the spec development work that EEA members are doing. We're establishing that standard for interoperability, which will result in trust that the Ethereum blockchain technology does work and can become ubiquitous. So that being said, I'll move ahead on the slides here. All right. To start off, the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance is a member-led industry organization based on the goal of empowering the use of Ethereum blockchain technology as an open and trusted standard for the betterment of all businesses and consumers. Don't worry, I'm not going to read every little bit of every slide during this entire presentation, but I really feel like this one is important and I need to read it out loud. It explains the EEA's identity and some of the organization's goals. So let's break it down a little bit. First part, the EEA is a member-led industry organization. So the EEA doesn't write code. Our members do. And our members come together to interact, network, to collaborate on the spec development, and really they're the ones that are leading the charge and driving this industry forward. The second part of that statement, empowering the use of Ethereum for the betterment of businesses and consumers. So first question perhaps to ask is, why Ethereum? Well, the bottom line is the ecosystem is huge. Ethereum has both a public mainnet and private variants, which is unique. Ethereum has hundreds of thousands of developers, thousands of companies that have products either in the proof of concept phase, pilot phase, production phase, and they're all eager to do business with this technology. So when you join us, it's really important that you get involved and that you participate. Really, it's with your help that we will be able to drive development of the specification further, and we'll be able to transform how businesses and consumers communicate and transact with one another moving forward. All right. Next slide up. So while we've touched on some of this in the vision of the organization, let's get a little bit more into the details. Why are standards important? Standards accelerate market adoption. So this ties back to interoperability and consumers trusting the tech. If there's trust, people will buy it. They drive economies of scale. Effectively, this means that as you increase production, in turn, you are going to create saving in costs, which certainly helps for any business. Who doesn't prefer a standards-based solution when you know it will work wherever you go and interoperably with other solutions? Multiple vendors of choice. Already mentioned this, but to add to it, the first movers in an industry are often companies that try to develop a proprietary solution, which long-term does not always work. Sometimes it does, and more power to them for sure. But we believe strongly that a standards-based approach is the more likely approach to yield positive results. Also important to note, as a part of the standards work, we are planning to launch and are going to launch a certification program that will verify that solutions meet the EEA spec. This includes a test network, and we'll get to this a little bit later in the slide deck. So if I don't answer any of your questions regarding the testnet and certification programs, please do bring those up at the end or punch them into the chat box at any time. Next up, the Board of Directors. So as you can see from this slide, we have a great cross-section of leaders from the Ethereum ecosystem, and they all provide EEA with strategic guidance. We've got a long list of different companies, from Fortune 500 to small businesses. We have an academic institution in the University of Illinois. This ultimately just gives us a variety of perspectives that contribute to the strategic vision of the organization and how we do things moving forward. As you can see from this slide here, we have 385 members strong, and we are growing. The names and logos that you see on this slide are just a small sample of EEA's full membership. If you're interested, the full list can be viewed at this web address here, entityalliance.org/members or members2. And unsurprisingly, we do want that number to continue to grow. Though truthfully, it is because the EEA specification becomes more robust as more Ethereum and blockchain experts contribute to its evolution. We need more people that will be defining technical requirements. We need more use cases that help to define market requirements for different industry verticals. We need to document legal and regulatory challenges and how they were overcome. And all of these things will be documented in the specification as it continues to evolve. Next, we have a cross-section of our different membership and where they're located geographically, as well as the industries that they represent. So starting with the pie chart on the left, you can see there are three key areas where most of our member offices reside: North America, Europe, and Asia. There are significant numbers of members in each of those regions. If, in fact, you're curious to know who some of those are, they can be viewed on that member's website. Moving to the pie chart on the right, we have some of the different industries that are represented by our members. And it's important to note that many of our members support multiple industries, as do most businesses. In this survey data, we did record what their primary interest was. So that being said, it's likely no surprise that banking and financial is the most widely recognized. The banking and financial markets have a lot of use cases for blockchain technology, many solutions in production. A good example of which is a new member to EEA, Comgo, who has just launched a trade and finance platform on the blockchain. Moving along to the EEA organizational structure. So in addition to the org structure, this slide also calls out the primary areas for member engagement, and that's really what I want to make sure to accentuate for you. Starting on the bottom section, so we have all of our leadership mentioned at the top. Starting on the far left, the Technical Specification Working Group. There are several task forces that operate within the Tech Spec Working Group, but that's where the actual specification development happens, is in all of that group and its task forces. Most of the coordination will take place asynchronously on a private EEA GitHub community where the spec is housed and where suggestions are proposed. Members, once they've signed up, are given access to that GitHub site. We also have a private EEA Slack channel that we use for asynchronous communication between monthly calls and meetings. So if you can imagine that this call that we're having today were to take place once a month and had a topical focus like the AI and blockchain task force, you'd be able to dial into those meetings regularly and then communicate with the group through Slack in between, and GitHub if it is technical spec related. Next up is our special interest groups, which represent the different industry verticals. The groups that you see here are our most engaged, and with one new one coming up, chemical. The vast majority of our members do have a significant interest in the special interest groups. We conducted a survey recently where we found that was one of the primary reasons that folks join. And if, in fact, you do not see an industry represented that you feel like your company represents or that EEA ought to be addressing, we are certainly open to creating more. Ultimately, that list will continue to grow as time goes on. Next to the right of that, the testnet working group. So this group recently launched. They are tasked with developing a test network for EEA members to test that their solutions conform to the EEA spec. Our goal for the testnet launch is Q2 of this year, which we'll get to when we get to the roadmap slide here in a little bit. So I'll dive into that a bit more deeply. Moving to the right, also have a legal advisory working group that meets monthly and addresses the legal and regulatory challenges that blockchain technology faces. So you as a member would be able to participate in any one of those groups. The certification working group is coming soon. Will largely be based upon the successes of the testnet working group as the test network needs to be in place in order for a certification program to be viable. Moving on. So associate memberships. We know that we are not alone in the promotion of blockchain technology as a solution for multiple industries, and we are forming partnerships with like-minded organizations. As you can see on the slide here, that at present includes Hyperledger, the Decentralized Identity Foundation, and the Inter-American Development Bank. Really, we're all in this mission to ensure blockchain's global adoption together. We know that, and we feel that relationships like these can serve to encourage interchain interoperability as well as general interoperability within the Ethereum ecosystem, although that interchain interoperability is definitely a longer-term goal of ours. moving along, so how does the EEA operate? When it comes to the specification work, we have our technical working groups. They develop the specification. The special interest groups, or SIGS, they identify use cases. They make sure that market requirements are addressed. And once we have all of that data combined, from there we can build our architecture stack, which displays that data as a reference diagram and is available for download on the EEA website, ent-alliance.org/resources. It's the same website for the specification documents. If you haven't gone ahead and downloaded those just yet, those are free to download. And following the architecture diagram, we deliver the specification, and the specification would eventually be used for the global testnet and evaluation of proofs of concept, and ensuring that the solutions out there are in compliance with the EEA spec. So public versus private. Quite often, it is assumed that EEA is focused solely on private permission networks, which I can tell you is not true. Private permission networks do provide greater control over the network. They can restrict access, effectively keeping important information private. So from a corporate perspective, you can imagine things like business processes, business workflows, intellectual property. Those are all important, and companies need to be mindful of that. So for that reason, and many more, of course, there are a number of valuable traits for the use of private networks. Now, while it's true that our members do value and use private permission networks, two good examples of which are JP Morgan's Quorum and Consensus's Pantheon platform, EEA and our members, we do also value the public mainnet, and we do track related developments. And I think that is captured well in the Enterprise Ethereum Reference Architecture Stack. So what you see here is a reference framework for the Ethereum ecosystem. In yellow, you have technologies discussed and described in the Ethereum yellow paper. Blue refers to the application layer. The areas highlighted in green here indicate areas of research and development for public mainnet. And then the areas in purple indicate the areas of interest and R&D for Enterprise Ethereum. And again, this diagram is available for free download on the EEA website. So as far as the specifications themselves go, the specs are constantly evolving, and we'll get to the cadence of when and how those are updated and evolved in just a moment here. But at present, I can say that we are very proud that our members have produced 2 iterations of the full technical specification. We're currently on V2, which was released back in Q4 of 2018. And so we're keeping on track with our 6-month cadence for that. Next iteration coming out in Q2 of this year. And then we have also released the first iteration of the Trusted Off-Chain Compute spec, version 0.5. Which took place while at DevCon 4. And again, if you have any interest in downloading any of those specs, ent-alliance.org/resources. Next up, so while we are primarily focused on the use of Ethereum for enterprise applications, we do track the Ethereum roadmap for the public mainnet. Some of those things include the scalability solutions like what you see on the page here. Obviously, I imagine everybody or most of the folks that are dialed in today have heard of these things, if not are readily aware of them. I'd be willing to bet that, like us, you are all keeping a very watchful eye on proof of stake and seeing how that moves forward. Certainly would love to see that initiative successful. Moving forward to the off-chain trusted compute spec. Here we have a few details about the specification. As you can see, there are numerous areas to consider when it comes to TEAS, the Trusted Execution Environments. The task force that helped to develop this specification is actually one of our more active groups. They're rapidly working toward version 1.0 of the Trusted Off-Chain Compute spec. And version 1 and version 2 are really about showcasing the bigger stories. So the task force wants to challenge what's been written into use cases. They want to get some feedback from the real world and then determine what's important for first deployments. Given that most projects nowadays are starting to reach pilot or production phase, it's really important to understand what's worked, what hasn't, and then ultimately that will help them to validate what's included in the spec, or it will give rise to some kind of change in the spec. So here we have EEA's technical roadmap, and you can see the cadence with which the technical resources and offerings both have been and will be developed. Starting from the original architecture stack and the original spec release back in the early days of 2018, you can see that there is a 6-month cadence to release the full EEA specification, the next iteration coming in Q2 of 2019. Important to note on that, we have a face-to-face meeting taking place in Lisbon, Portugal on February 28th and March 1st, so that the members can get together and discuss in person some of the challenges they've been discussing on the phone for many, many months. And we feel it's going to help to accelerate the release of this version of the specification. We do occasionally host those face-to-face meetings, and that's, I guess, an important point to note. As I'm sure we all know, the in-person collaboration does mean a lot, even if most of the round-the-year work is done either on the phone or virtually in a decentralized fashion. Continuing down the roadmap, so you see that coming up here in Q2 of 2019, we also have the first iteration of the global testnet for evaluation of proofs of concept. Everything's looking good there. We had the testnet working group, which is really the precursor to our certification and testing program, was recently launched. They are meeting regularly to help prepare us for that launch of the testnet in Q2, and then later on down the road for the certification program that is scheduled to come in 2020, upon which will be based upon the use of that testnet to verify compliance with the EEA spec in various Ethereum-based solutions. So EEA and social impact. It is really important for us not only to help promote the standards that will eventually, the specification that will eventually become the standard for blockchain technology, but to know who is it impacting downstream, how is it impacting those people. So we've been forming partnerships. Right now we do have a formal relationship with the DIF, but are looking to get involved with others in the hopes that we can impact things for the better through the use of blockchain technology. Next up, the EEA initiatives. So beyond our specification and certification programs, education is a really important part of what we're doing here at the EEA. We have formed a relationship with Consensus Academy to offer discounts on Consensus general blockchain educational courses, and also the more specific Ethereum developer training. Obviously, that's critically important to the evolution of this ecosystem and our member community, so we want to be able to offer some valuable training for them. We also have, so within each of the special interest group, industry group meetings, we bring in topically focused speakers. So if you think about real estate, telecom, energy, advertising, the intent is to educate our members on what's happening in their industry vertical, because so many projects across the board range and cover such a wide variety of things that we may not be aware that someone next door is working on a very similar project and perhaps has had greater success or has had some challenges they've faced. So we encourage both members and non-members to present in those special interest industry groups to talk about what the work is that they're doing, to talk about those successes, those challenges. And then also it helps to share that information so that they know what solutions are being developed to support their industry specifically. One of the more general approaches to education that we've had is in our education and research special interest group. It's really dedicated to that general interest and general topics on educating members. We've had a few examples recently that would include the future of enterprise Ethereum for 2019, what is a zero-knowledge proof, what are consensus mechanisms. So for folks that perhaps aren't so familiar with blockchain technology, that are not developers, but need to be able to speak the language and understand the terminology, we do provide some educational resources for that to be accomplished. Also run through different community engagement opportunities. So I would encourage you to follow EEA on social media to stay apprised of all the different efforts on behalf of our members and our organization. We do run meetups also from time to time. Those meetups are not member-only events. So while we might host the technical face-to-face that's taking place at the end of this month is truly a members-only event, and some of the more technical working groups that meet up face-to-face, those are members-only quite often. The meetups are not. We do want to encourage the non-member community to get involved and to understand what the value proposition of the organization is, the value proposition of standards and the work that you're performing. And then we've saved the best for last. I imagine you have to ask yourself, is this somewhere I should be contributing? Is this an organization I should be a part of? Well, to give you some thoughts to consider when making that decision, first up, in a recent member survey, our members informed us that the top 3 reasons that they join and the top 3 benefits they take advantage of are the standards development, networking with blockchain innovators and influencers, which does take place by way of our special interest industry groups, and also the technical spec working group and the legal advisory working group. Those are mainly the folks that are out there doing the work. If you're going to network with people that are at the forefront of this technology and helping to push it forward, those are definitely the folks to get involved with. And of course, last but not least, is just to participate in those special interest industry groups to know what's happening in my industry. How can I define the specification as it pertains to my industry and make sure that the areas I need to have covered and that I want to ensure are included in the interoperability specifications are addressed. And then using the bullet points here on the slide, is it important for you and for your organization to stay current on this specification work, to stay up to date on Ethereum for the enterprise? What does it look like to be a part of a global community? Is it important to broaden your network? I would venture a guess to say yes. Is the work that you're doing getting out there? Are you raising awareness for the solutions that you've developed? EEA can help there, especially by way of these special interest industry groups. Are you getting exclusive access to some of the best minds in Ethereum blockchain across multiple industries, or are you operating within an echo chamber? The general rule of thumb to move things forward, especially when it comes to the technical specification, is to develop consensus, right? Makes sense that we would use consensus for something like this. But by way of doing so, you do get dissenting opinions. Not everyone is always on the same page, and certain people do have very strong opinions about the way that things should be moving forward. And it's good to have that level of discourse. So membership does provide that opportunity. And then I would say that as a final point, does furthering your education and credentialing make you more valuable, or will eventually certification of your solution make it more valuable to the community and easier to sell? Perhaps, yes. I would say yes, but that, of course, is up to you. And after asking all these questions, I consider these to be the right reasons to join. If it struck a chord with you and you'd like to know more, by all means, contact us. We've got the contact information at the bottom of the page, the link to join. The membership at email address is probably the easiest way to do so. And I guess with that, are there any questions out there or anything that folks would like me to answer?
Just as a reminder, everyone is muted, so if you want to ask a question, just pop it into the chat box or raise your hand so I can unmute you. There's a raise your hand feature that you can use if you'd like to speak.
All righty. Well, if there are no questions, I am punching my email address into the chat window as well. If you'd like to get in touch, you'd like to have a more direct conversation, perhaps understand how can EEA membership specifically support your business, your organization, I'm happy to have that conversation with you. I can send you a link to my calendar if you'd like, or we can figure out a good time to connect and figure out how that works. All right, had a question come in. How can non-members get training on the platform and other offerings? Well, to get training on Ethereum, so Consensus Academy, the organization that we've developed this partnership with, their classes are not restricted to EEA members. So EEA members do receive a discount, but there's that, and there are several other training organizations out there that that for sure could help to, I guess, increase your awareness of what the Ethereum platform is capable of doing. Other than that, I think here, there are technical resources for non-members to download. We have the technical specification, the off-chain trusted compute specification, the architecture stack. There's a video on the architecture stack where Connor Svensson, one of our technical leads and the founder of the Web3J library, walks through that architecture stack. Those would be probably the best things I could offer to you as a non-member. And then if you'd like to have a conversation of you know, does it make sense for my organization to join? Because the answer is not always yes, and I'm happy to be honest about that. You know, set up a time for us to connect. And I see the other question is if slides will follow, and yes, absolutely. Any other questions out there? Yes, could you make a slide of the training and a slide of the technical training with links? We can certainly add some additional information. For sure, Michael, I will do that. Let me make a note of that real quick. And then, thank you, Steve. Leonardo has asked how is EEA working with Constantinople, the Constantinople hard fork estimated to take place on 28 February? That is a wonderful question. I do not have the answer to that one, to be frank, although I can certainly connect you with some of our more technical folks who would be able to give you a better sense of how that factors in. I don't even want to put information out there that I don't know to be certain and true. But if you would like, Leonardo, you can certainly shoot me an email separately with that question, and I'll pass it along to our technical folks and get you synced up with them. And the technical references, yep, absolutely. Let's see here. Okay. Although I will ask our marketing team to add this into the follow-up email that comes out. The link here is where you can download all of the different technical resources, eeth-alliance.org/resources. And if it asks you to enter your information multiple times, you should not need to do so. The pop-up window may come back up on you. Neil has asked, how does the EEA collaborate with the Ethereum Foundation itself? So we keep in close contact with the Ethereum Foundation, and certainly our leadership is in touch with their leadership, but both are left to operate independently, if that makes sense. Let me see if I can give that greater context, Emil. Yes. Yes, we do. We do act independently. There is not a formal relationship between the Ethereum Foundation and the EEA. Again, our leadership on both sides does keep in close contact, but there is not necessarily a formal alliance or collaboration. Not to say that we would not welcome that at some point. All right. Any additional questions? That is a wonderful question, Anil. So the question came up, how do you ensure that the roadmaps are aligned between the EEA and the Ethereum Foundation so that the community is not fragmented? So I know within the technical spec working group, it came up recently that they want to work more closely with folks doing development work on the public mainnet side for that exact reason, so that the community is not fragmented. I'm not the best person to answer that question, but as I mentioned to Leonardo, if you wouldn't mind sending me an email separately, I'm happy to connect you with our technical staff who can answer that in greater depth. Perfect. Thank you. Good questions. I appreciate that. Anything else? I'm happy to hang out for a couple of minutes, and certainly appreciate you all dialing in and listening to my spiel and learning a little bit more about the EEA. I hope that what we've shared with you today helps to place into context what our organization is here to accomplish and how perhaps you can integrate your company into the work that you're currently doing with developing this specification. Thank you, Bast. All right.
Great presentation, Bill. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this for us.
Sure.
This meeting was recorded, and along with the slides, it will be distributed. And we really appreciate everybody dialing in. But if there's no more questions, I'm going to go ahead and conclude the meeting. And again, you have all of our contact information here. It'll be distributed. So if you think of any questions later, don't hesitate to reach out to us at all.
Perfect.
And the meeting is adjourned.
Appreciate your help today, and thank you everybody for dialing in. It's been a pleasure,
awesome.
And look forward to working with you.
Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Take care. Thank you.